bookworms, and welcome back. About 2 months ago, another YouTuber here on BookTube did a video about different books which set in different countries around the world. I really liked her video, I liked the concept, so I decided to steal it, but I don't plagiarize, so when I steal ideas, at least I give proper credit. So the YouTuber's name is Regan, her channel is called The Peruse Project, hopefully I'm pronouncing it correctly, and anyway I will link her video down below so you can go ahead and check her out. So I picked 10 books, each one of them set in a different location around the world. By the way, all the locations are real, so you won't find the Shire or Narnia on this list. And also, I decided to pick books that don't just set in a certain location, but that their plot is somehow connected to this country, whether it's by landscape or culture or in some way. So without further ado, let's begin. I'll start with an American classic. This book is fun and funny, but it's also considered one of the most important books in American literature history. This is The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn by Mark Twain. Now, I know that the word classic might sound intimidating to some, and I know that this book is one of those books that schools force you to read, but guys, take my recommendation. This book is great. It's very fun and fast to read. The language is not difficult. It's very funny. It's very witty. Even though it talks about some serious subjects like slavery, it still manages to be so much fun. If you want to have a classic in your arsenal of books that you've read, definitely read this one. For the second book, I want to take you to my homeland, Israel. Even though it sets in Jerusalem and I'm originally from Tel Aviv, nonetheless. Speaking of books that school force you to read but turn out to be really great, the next book is a very famous Israeli book called Someone to Run With by David Grossman. This book is basically about two teenagers, Asaf and Tamar. When Asaf finds a stray dog walking around the streets of Jerusalem, he decides to walk around with her and to see maybe the dog will lead him to her owners, he will be able to return her. But she leads him to different strange places where you get to meet all sorts of people who recognize her, and little by little he finds out about the dog's owner, Tamar, who's around his age. And he decides to look for her, and we also see things from her point of view, and I feel that this description doesn't do the book justice. It's such a beautifully written book, so fascinating, and it suits adults and teenagers as well. Speaking of books about people who are looking for other people, I'm just trying to find a connection between the different books. The next book is a beautifully written Spanish masterpiece called The Shadow of the Wind by Carlos Ruiz Zafón. It sets in Barcelona in the 40s and is about a young man called Daniel, and one day he finds this lost book called The Shadow of the Wind. As he tries to find more books from the same author, he finds out that there's someone out there who systematically looks for these books from the same author and burns them. And obviously Daniel wants to find out why. And he starts to investigate, and little by little he finds out about the author's life, which is very interesting, very dark, very sad, very fascinating, and it's like a jigsaw puzzle. Piece by piece, we kind of start getting a clear picture. And like the previous book, I think that this description doesn't do the book justice, but it's such a beautiful, magical book without any actual magic. But I don't know, the word magical just comes to mind, and just take my recommendation and read Shadow of the Wind. Let's move out from Europe for a moment and go to the Far East, to China. The next book is called Snowflower and the Secret Fan by the Chinese-American author Lisa C. It's set in 19th century China and is about this years-long friendship between two young girls. But it's also about the Chinese tradition of foot binding. There was this tradition in China where they would take very young girls and kind of tie up their feet so they won't grow and reach their full size. And obviously this was a very painful process. So what they did is create this sisterhood between two young girls that would experience this process together. And it would create this bond between them that was considered so strong. It was considered stronger than marriage. Now this book goes through many years, and through the years life take each one of them to a different direction, and every now and then they would fight and things would happen, sad things, happy things, but the bond between them stays strong. And this is a very interesting, very beautifully written book about tradition, about Chinese tradition, but mostly about friendship through the years. I talked about China, now let's move to Japan. I'm kind of embarrassed to say that the only book about Japan that I have here is by an American author, but nonetheless, I personally really enjoyed it, and it's the very famous Memoirs of a Geisha by Arthur Golden. The story follows a young girl named Chio from the moment she's sold by her family to a geisha house, through the years of training and obviously many other interesting things, until she becomes a successful geisha. Now, I personally don't know almost anything about Japanese culture, so it was super interesting to read this book which describes to such detail this exotic culture, from the way the houses looked and the way the clothes looked, and really how you tie up a kimono and everything. And I do want to mention for a second the movie version, which, although they took a Chinese actress to play the geisha and thought that no one would notice, they also took these descriptions and made them into beautiful visuals. Okay guys, we're back to Europe, this time to a book that I've just reviewed, The Historian by Elizabeth Kostova. This book takes our American protagonist through a journey all across Eastern Europe. He goes to Turkey, he goes to Hungary, he goes to Bulgaria, all in search for the truth about the Smith regarding Vlad the Impaler. Now, if you're interested in more information, I really just did a review on this video. Go check it out. I'll link it below, and you can hear me talk about that. What I do want to say in this video, however, is one of the most interesting aspects of this book was the way each country is being described. You got lots of descriptions in this book of the different landscapes, the different beliefs, the different architecture, the different rules of behavior, and it's very interesting to see how each one of them differ and how our American protagonists see them. And you know, he tastes food, different kinds of food here and there, and the way he described the difference also between the languages, and that's just very, very interesting, since this book doesn't occur in one country but in a few. The next book was written by a German author but sets in 18th century France. It's called Perfume, the Story of a Murderer by Patrick Süskind. This is a truly dark, creepy story about an orphan who is born with this extraordinary sense of smell, much stronger than what's humanly possible. And maybe it's due to the conditions where he lived, or maybe it was part of him all along, but he kind of lacks basic empathy. And he's very fascinated with perfumes, the way perfumes are made, and he's determined to create the perfect perfume, the perfect smell, the scent of a woman. Not related to the movie, was the same title. But apparently the best way to create this perfect women perfume is by murdering them. Yes, this is a truly dark, creepy story. It has a lot of gothic atmosphere, but it's written so well. The way the author described the smells just make you feel as if you live there, and that makes the book even creepier. If you like darker books, if you like the gothic atmosphere, definitely read Perfume. We're going down under to Australia for our next book. It's called A Fraction of a Whole by Stephen Poults. This is kind of a drama comedy with lots of very dark humor, and it spreads across two generations. We have a father and we have a son, and basically the first part of the book is the story of the father and how he kind of ruined his own life, and the second part is how he ruined his son's life. It's a lot better than what I made it sound. But if you love a lot of dark humor, if you can handle lots of dark humor and a kind of a drama comedy, sad comedy in a way, and if you like books that are not necessarily fantasy but are kind of weird, that's definitely the book for you. Okay guys, we're down to the last 2 books, and these 2 are kind of unique. They don't simply take place at a certain country, but also at a very specific time period, which is very much associated with a certain country. You'll see what I mean. The next book is a brilliant thriller that I've already reviewed, set in Soviet Russia. It's called Child 44 by Tom Rob Smith. And I said it in my review, but I'll say it again here. My Ukrainian mother told me after she read the book that she was absolutely shocked to see that an English author managed to portray Soviet Russia so well. This book is about a serial killer in the USSR, but like I said in my review, what was really scary about Child 44 is the atmosphere. This paranoia or fear that people felt that every single thing that you might say or do might be heard by someone that might think that you can be a spy and then off to the gulag with you. It's such a brilliant thriller, and it's such a shame that the movie was so terrible. Don't watch the movie, read the book. For the last book, I decided to pick a book from my favorite time period to read about, Victorian England. Now, there are tons of books out there about the Victorian period, which is, by the way, the 19th century, in case you didn't know. But for this list, I decided to pick the book The Yard by Alex Grayson. The reason I love this book so much is not only that it's a wonderful detective book, but it also manages to portray Victorian London in its true, darker reality. I have a feeling that people sometimes kind of romanticizing about this period without realizing that it wasn't a very nice time to live in. This book sets in 1889, which is a year after Jack the Ripper. It's kind of an aftermath of Jack the Ripper. And it talks about a lot of things that happened during that time period. But for example, it talks about how people were so scared because for the first time there was this man who would just walk around murdering people with no apparent reason. And the police never managed to catch him, so people didn't trust the police anymore. It also talks about poverty, the filth in the streets and in homes. It talks about social problems, like the usage of little kids as chimney cleaners. You know, those kids usually didn't survive beyond the age of 10. They would usually die from lung cancer and similar diseases. But it also talks about medical progress, the discovery of fingerprints, about the change in psychology, the notion that maybe we shouldn't lock up in terrible conditions every single person who doesn't fit society. The book kind of makes it seem as if all of these things happen at the same time, which obviously they didn't, but I really love the way it portrays a lot of different aspects of the Victorian period. And if you like good detective books, if you like London's darker side, you would definitely love The Yard. Okay guys, those were my 10 books. I want to know which ones would you have added to this list. So comment down below and tell me which exotic books about exotic places were your favorite. Like this video, subscribe to my channel, and you can also follow me on Instagram. I'm at m_Grimalkin, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye.